Oh, Chair Hill, you're muted.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Committee of Adjustment meeting for the Township of Georgian Bay for Friday, October 13, 2022. This morning, there's a public meeting scheduled for 2 consents and 3 minor variance applications. There's also 1 application not subject to a public meeting to be considered a consent application. Morning, Mike.
Good day.
I will briefly summarize the procedure to be utilized for the meeting. First, the Secretary Treasurer will advise the committee as to when, how, and to whom notice of each of the hearings was circulated for the applications being considered. Next, each of the applications will be considered separately. Planning staff will advise of the purpose and effect of the applications and provide any information that is relevant. The Secretary Treasurer will summarize any correspondence on file, and from there, the applicant will may make a brief presentation if they so choose, and the public will have an opportunity to speak to the applications being considered. After the public forum, the committee will then deliberate on the proposed applications and consider a motion to either pass, defeat, or defer the decision of the applications. The consent applications being considered this morning are B22-10 for 860 East Shore Road, B2220 for 351 Rocky Shore Road. The minor variance applications being considered this morning are A22-17 for 134 Echo Bay Road, A22-10 for 2 Island 740, and A21-25 for 89 Sunrise Trail. The consent application not subject to a public meeting is B22-03 for 951 Honey Harbor Road. Before we begin, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Okay, seeing none. I have a motion moved by Member Ferguson, seconded by Member Cotto. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay approves the minutes of September 16, 2022 as circulated. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Thank you. The motion is carried. I have a second resolution and moved by Member Jarvis, seconded by Member Demkew. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment adopts the agenda dated October 14, 2022. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. The motion is carried. Thank you.
Chair Hill.
Yes, Member Kuchar.
Is Member Caddo present?
I do not see him on the screen.
He's having trouble getting into the meeting. He did let me know he was having difficulties, so we're working on that.
I just didn't know whether we should change the prior motion or whether he was the mover.
We can change that.
That's all. That's what my only concern.
Yep,
Other than for his
note of that,
well-being,
and I'll
of
change
course.
that.
Yeah, I noticed that there was a little difference in the sign-in today, so maybe Mr. Caddo was wrestling with the same thing I did. Okay, Madam Secretary, could you please advise as to the distribution of the applications?
Notice of each of the applications was sent by first-class mail to the respective owners and assessed persons within 120 meters, 500 meters, or 800 meters, and to those persons and agencies likely to have an interest in the application. The notices were sent at least 20 days prior to this morning's meeting. Included in each notice was an explanation of the purpose and effect of the application and a key map showing the location of the property. Other relevant information may have also been provided. These circulations were provided in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act 1990.
Thank you very much. Our first consent application this morning is B22-10 for 860 East Shore Road. To the planner, please.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Christina Hansani. I'm a planner with Richardson Associates. I will be presenting this first application. Share my screen here. If the host should enable my screen sharing, please.
You should be okay to share now.
Okay, I hope everyone can see my screen. Okay. So the first seventh application, B2210, is for 860 East Shore Road. The applicant for the proposed consent application is Heidi One Alman. Their agent is John Jackson of John Jackson Planner Inc. The purpose of this consent application is to create a new lot with an area of about 0.5 hectares and a frontage of about 86.5 meters. Here's the location of the subject property. The property is generally located on the west side of East Shore Road on the shoreline of Kingston Lake, has an area of about 1.8 hectares and a frontage of about 194 meters. Here's an aerial view of the subject property. The property is currently occupied by a detached residential dwelling, 2 bunkies, a privy, 3 sheds, and a wood storage structure. The existing dwelling and bunkies are legal structures built in 1980s. The dwelling was recently renovated with the benefit of a building permit. The privy was built in 1990s and the sheds were built after 2002. These structures did not require building permits as they were less than 10 square meters in size. Here's a plan of survey showing the proposed severance. A new lot with an area of 0.5 hectares and a frontage of 86.5 meters will be created through this application. The retained lands will have an area of about 1.2 hectares and a frontage of about 86.5 meters. The structure outlined in red is a proposed garage structure, which the applicant is not proposing to build at this time. However, staff have accounted for it in our lot coverage calculations. These are photos from staff from a site visit conducted by staff on September 27th. The first photo shows the existing dwelling on the subject property, and the second one shows the existing shoreline in front of the dwelling. Figure 3 shows the bunkie on the proposed retained lands. It is our understanding that this will be converted to a shed. Photo 4 shows the bunkie on the proposed severed lands, and figure 5 shows the existing vegetation along the shoreline. Here's an overview of the planning data associated with the subject property. The property is considered rural lands in the context of the PPS. Subject property is designated waterfront in the District of Muskoka Official Plan. A wetland feature and deer wintering area is identified on the subject property, and the property has high to very high potential for archaeological resources. The subject property is designated waterfront in the Township Official Plan and is located adjacent to both Type 1 and Type 2 fish habitat. Lastly, the property is zoned shoreline residential Type 1 or SR1. Staff have reviewed the proposal in context of the applicable policy framework. The applicant's proposal is supported by an environmental impact assessment prepared by Riverstone Environmental Solutions and peer-reviewed by Hutchinson Environmental. The report concludes that subject to adherence to the recommendations provided in the report, the proposal can proceed without negatively impacting any natural heritage features identified on the subject property. The proposal is consistent with PPS as a new shoreline residential lot will be created through this application and residential development is permitted on rural lands. The proposal conforms to the district official plan as the proposal meets the lot area and frontage requirements for creation of new lots, and the environmental constraints are satisfactorily addressed through the EIS. The proposal conforms to the township OP as well as residential development is allowed on these lands and is compatible with the surrounding lands. The proposal meets minimum lot area and frontage requirements for creation of new lots, and fish habitat is addressed through the EIS, and the recommendations of the study will be implemented through site plan control. The existing development complies with all the provisions of the zoning bylaw, with the exception of 3 deficiencies resulting from this proposal. One is the separation distance between the sheds and the wood storage structure on the proposed 7 lands, which is less than 5 meters. The second is the interior side yard setback for the privy, which is currently about 65 meters, but will be reduced to 1 meter after the severance. Lastly, after the severance, the severed lands will be devoid of a dwelling or primary use, while the existing dry bunkie and sheds will remain on site. The applicant has the option to demolish these structures or address these deficiencies through a planning act application. I note that the EIS submitted by the applicant identifies the wetland feature on the subject property. Staff recommend the zoning bylaw amendments to zone the super environmental protection. The other deficiencies identified on the property can also be addressed through the same application at the same time.
Ms. Sani, we seem to be getting a lot of feedback here. I'm just wondering if you have your computer mic on as well as your headset, and you were getting that feedback. Could you check that, please?
I apologize.
Want me to call Norma?
Is this any better?
Yes, that is better.
Okay.
Thank you.
Share my screen again. Would you want me to go back a few slides to reiterate any points, or are we good to proceed with the recommendations?
Yeah, there's still feedback. I'm just wondering if you have two mics working at the same time. However, we can proceed. We can still understand what you're saying.
Okay. So based on the review of the relevant policies, staff recommend approval of the application with standard conditions such as payment of taxes, payment of 5% cash in lieu of parkland, submission of registered reference plan, and payment of fees and disbursements as applicable. Staff also recommend that site plan control agreement be executed, which notes that the existing 1T on the 7 lands shall be used as a sleeping cabin only until a primary use and septic system is established for the 7 lands. Additionally, staff recommend that the applicant obtain a zoning bylaw amendment to allow for the existence of these structures without a primary use on the 7 lands. Through the same zoning bylaw amendment application, the separation distance between the accessory structures on the 7 lands as well as the interior side yard setback for the privy will be addressed if the applicant does not intend to demolish these structures. A zoning bylaw amendment application should also be completed to enable environmental zoning for the wetland feature on the subject property. All these matters can be addressed through one zoning bylaw amendment application. Lastly, the applicant should address comments from Bell Canada requesting any easement to their satisfaction. That is my presentation. I'll be happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Sani. Have we had any correspondence in this application, Madam Secretary?
One letter of correspondence was received from Bell Canada requiring an easement. One letter of no objection was received from the District of Muskoka, provided that the recommendations of the site evaluation report prepared by Riverstone Environmental Solution, Inc., dated January 2022, and the peer review prepared by Hutchinson Environmental Sciences, LTE, dated September 27, 2022, are implemented through appropriate development control techniques. And one letter of support was received from John Emalanjo.
Thank you. I noticed that the applicant is in attendance. Is there anything that you wish to add to the planner's comments?
Mr. Chairman, it's Stephen Allman, actually Heidi von Allman's husband. She's asked me to speak. She's hearing impaired, so it's a little bit easier. I think just a couple things from our respect. One, thank you very much for the time that you've given us today and the documentation. We've had a chance to review it. We're working with John Jackson as our planner. We believe that most of the conditions that are here are reasonable and addressable through the process. For the committee, I just want to emphasize a number of things. We are 50+ year cottagers on Gibson Lake. We plan on turning it into our home. The severance is not for the purpose of sale. It is actually for the purpose of allowing us to have our children, who are equally enamored with Gibson Lake, make it part of their future state. We have 3 children, one who lives in Barrie, one in Toronto, and one overseas. We are stewards of the land. We take a lot of care and respect with the land. We understand our place is limited at Gibson, and our timing is limited, but we intend on spending as much of it there as humanly possible. Respecting how the process works, we will work with our planner. We will work with all the required applicants and services in order to address any of the deficiencies. But our commitment is that we are following the process, and we are very excited about the future for our family and for the community of Gibson Lake. happy to take any questions from anybody if they have any specifically, but just wanted to make that statement.
Thank you very much for that. I see we have another Von Allman in attendance. Is there anything you wish to add to the comments made?
I think there's three Von Allmans here, so it depends which one you're asking about.
Well,
Brian, introduce yourself so that they know who you are, and then.
Sure thing. Hi, my name is Brian Von Allman. I'm one of the three children that was mentioned in what my dad just went through, and my mom Heidi and my brother Mark are both present at Gibson Lake right now. As far as things to add, like my dad said, this property was purchased a long time ago by my grandfather, and for us, this is a future planning thing. My brother is in his early 30s, lives in Barrie. I'm looking down the barrel of 30 now and planning ahead. And I think that with the way that the cottage is set up now, for our plans to be realistic, for us to have our families up there in the future and to have enough space, the severance would be an integral part of that plan. But by no means is it imminent necessarily. This is just us trying to be effective in planning ahead. And as my dad said, we're stewards of the land, so we want to make sure everything's done by the book and as responsibly and sustainably as possible. So appreciate the guidance there.
thank you. Anyone else?
I'm just happy to introduce myself as well. I'm Mark Von Allman, the other son, as Brian mentioned, who lives in Barrie, and mentioned by my father. No point in reiterating the points clarified by both Steve and Brian at this point. So thank you very much for hearing our proposal today, and we appreciate it very much.
Thank you. And I see no members of the public in attendance. So with that, we'll close the public session of the meeting and bring the application before the committee for any questions or comments. And we'll begin with Member Ferguson.
Chair Hill, I do see a hand raised by someone in the member of the public. John Jano has his hand raised.
Yes, thank you, fellow Mr. Chairman and the committee members. Yeah, I am a resident on Gibson Lake. We're at 1124 East Shore Road, just up the road from the Van Allman site and 860 East Shore Road. And I did send in a letter of support that really summarizes why we are in support of the proposed lot severance. I think the point that I'd really like to make is the Van Allman property is very unique on Gibson Lake. The size of it at just under 5 acres is probably more than double the size of the typical residential lots or the rural residential lots on Gibson Lake, such that even with the lot severance, the two lots, the two individual lots themselves will still likely be larger than most of the lots themselves on Gibson Lake. In addition, Steve and Heidi's property is very well buffered from their neighbors. There's crown land on one side of them, and as you can see from the site plan on the other side, their own property buffers their neighbor to the north, such that there are several hundred feet of separation distance. And even in terms of the view from across the lake, there's a lot of crown land that way, such that there isn't any real cottages that are overlooking their property directly. So in terms of visual impacts, etc., really there's not going to be a significant impact for this. And, finally, we just like to commend Steve and Heidi and their family in terms of, going about doing this the right way and doing it for the right reasons in terms of trying to extend their legacy on Gibson Lake. Certainly my family's been here probably on a similar length of time frame as Steve's family, and the community is important here, and it's certainly welcoming that Steve's family and his family and the next generation will carry on, and as such we're in full support of the severance. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Mercy, I don't see any other members of the public in attendance. So with that, oh, I heard a noise there. Does somebody else wish to speak? No. All right. With that, I'll close the public portion of the application and bring the matter before the committee for any questions or comments. And we'll begin with Member Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, these certainly are generous sized lots, being 1.28 acres and 3.16 acres respectively. There's a lot to clean up. There are a lot of conditions to be met, but once those are all looked after, I certainly have no concern supporting this application.
Thank you. Member Caddo.
Thanks, Chair Hill. Sorry for being a little late. I was having trouble getting on the Zoom meeting here. Yeah, I agree with Member Ferguson. No problems here. I support this.
Okay, Member Demkew.
Thank you, Chair Hill. Yes, I visited the property and had a chance to talk to Heidi, and I have absolutely no problem with this. Good planning, future thoughts, and I'd fully support it.
Thank you. Member Matthews.
Thank you, Chair Hill. No, I have no questions. It seems like a reasonable request, and I would support this application.
Thank you. Member Jarvis.
Yeah, I just have a question or two for our planner. Gerson Ram, on attachment 1, which I believe is page 8 of the package, you give a site location map. And my impression from that map, I mean, unfortunately, it doesn't take in, I don't think it takes in all the property. Is that just the retained lands that are on that map, or is that the entire property? Because if I look at the entire property, I see more lake. It's like on a peninsula, but that doesn't show in that site plan shot. Am I misinterpreting things?
I apologize. Speaking for you, Hill, Member Jarvis, can you advise on which attachment you're referring to?
Attachment 1.
Okay. I'll just quickly review it. I'll bring it up on my screen here.
Mr. Jarvis, can I answer the question too? It's Stephen Allman here.
Yeah.
I think the red line is pushed too far to the north. It's actually picking up our neighbor's property. It should be farther down to pick up the small bunkie at the south end of the property. I think it's the red line that's throwing it off.
That often happens. That's what I was seeking clarification.
If you look at the survey, which is attachment 3, I believe, or 2, that's more representative of.
Which is reasonable. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate that. Gerson Ram, is that correct?
Yes, speaking for you, Hill, that is correct. It's usually it's a GIS system. It's not always appropriate, so that's why that discrepancy has occurred.
Okay, and then one other question for you, Gerson Ram. I note the demarcations for the 20-meter setback and the 30-meter setback from high water. I don't have any specific issues there. Do we have an idea where the septic is in relation? I don't think I saw that. Maybe it's in the survey. Never mind, it's covered. What about the driveways and the bunkie area? Is that going to be required to be moved back at some point on the severed lands?
Speaking through Chair Hill, so the driveway is existing. There are no changes being proposed to the driveway at this time.
Okay. Thank you very much. No other questions.
Thank you, Member Jarvis. Member Kuchar.
Thank you, Chair Hill. I think given that the severed lot, it certainly exceeds the minimum size lot required for Gibson Lake and all the background work that has been done and the conditions that have been listed, I have no objection to this application.
Okay, thank you very much. And with that, I will read the resolution. Moved by Member Matthews, seconded by Member Kuchar. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment receives Development Services Report 2022-88 and hereby grants provisional approval to consent application B22-10 as advertised, subject to the following conditions. 1, that municipal taxes be paid in full up to the date of request of issuance of the consent certificate. 2, a reference plan for the consent shall be prepared and duly registered by the Ontario Land Surveyor and 1 copy filed with Secretary Treasurer of the committee. A draft copy of the reference plan shall be provided to the Secretary Treasurer for review and approval prior to registration on title. 3, a payment of 5% in lieu of parkland dedication shall be paid for the severed lands in accordance with Section 51, subsection 1 of the Planning Act to the Township of Georgian Bay. The Township shall retain an appraiser at the applicant's expense to prepare the appraisal in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act if the value of the land cannot otherwise be agreed upon. 4, that a site plan control application be submitted and approved, and that a site plan agreement be executed detailing the existing and proposed development in the manner prescribed by the applicable policies of the Georgian Bay official plan as they relate to the administration of site plan control. The site plan agreement shall provide that the existing sleeping cabin on the severed lands, if not demolished, will be exclusively used as a dry sleeping cabin until a primary use with a septic system is established on the severed lands. And 5, that the applicant demolish the existing structures, sleeping cabin, 2 sheds, and the wood storage structure on the proposed severed lot, or in the alternative, obtain approval for a zoning bylaw amendment to permit the accessory structures on these lands without a primary use. 6, that the applicant obtain approval for a zoning bylaw amendment at their sole cost to zone the environmental features identified through the environmental impact study to a restrictive zone. 7, that the applicant demolish and relocate the existing sheds and open roof storage structures on the retained lands to meet the separation distance requirement between structures. In the alternative, the applicant may address this efficiency through an appropriate Planning Act application. 8, that the applicant demolish or relocate the existing privy to meet the side yard setback requirement, or in the alternative, address it through an appropriate Planning Act application. 9, that the applicant shall address Bell Canada's comments to their satisfaction. And 10, that all fees and disbursements, legal, engineering, and planning, if any, incurred by the township with respect to this application shall be paid for by the owner. And 11, conditions set out herein shall be completed within 2 years of the date of the decision of the committee. And please note that conditions 5, 6, 7, and 8 can be addressed through one zoning bylaw amendment application. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Thank you. The application, the motion is carried. Thank you very much. Okay, Madam Secretary, when we are ready with our next application. Okay, it looks like we are ready to go. And just before we begin, Ms. Sani, if you were speaking to this one, we are getting a lot of feedback there that perhaps you could have a look and see if there's something that can be done on your end.
Yes, Chair Hill, I'm not presenting the next one. I'll try to fix the audio in the meantime.
Yeah, it's either the room has an echo or you've got 2 mics that are working, something like that. But it's difficult to work with.
Yeah, I
All right.
helpfully suggested we had just a random meeting the other day. The room looks like it has no accoutrements to it, so no sound absorption. So you get an echo from the walls. And I know I've had a headset before and I had a real problem with a microphone. Is it possible the mic on your headset is not working and your computer is picking up your voice?
That may be the case. I'll try an alternative headset in the meantime.
Okay.
Yeah, it's still quite prevalent there. So anyway, our next application is B22-20 for 351 Rocky Shore Road. To the planner, please.
Good morning, Chair Hill and members of committee. My name is Allie. I'm a township planner here. I'll be taking you through application B2220. Allow me to share my screen. There we go. Okay, so this is a consent application to establish a right-of-way over a portion of Rocky Shore Road in favor of the subject property, that being 315 Rocky Shore Road. I'm getting feedback through my headset. Is anyone else?
No.
Yes. Yeah, I know I'm getting it. It's minor, but it's definitely feedback.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm getting it as well.
Yeah, minor feedback.
But it's not as bad as Gerson Rams, if that helps.
I think as Ali is talking, maybe everyone should be on mute. There could be some feedback from everyone else as well.
Okay, if everyone goes on mute, does this sound a little bit better? It sounds better on my end already. Thumbs up?
Yes.
Okay, okay, I will proceed then. So as I mentioned previously, this is a consent application for a right-of-way. Staff are satisfied that all the required permissions have been received from the 4 road owners in order to establish the right-of-way. No development or site alteration is proposed at this time through this application. This is technical in nature, and it's to provide legal deeded access to the property. The application is to establish a right-of-way for the benefiting lands over a portion of Rocky Shore Road, which is owned by Log Point Inc., Severn Lodge, the Township of Georgian Bay, and the Crown. All 4 owners of the road have provided the required permissions to establish the requested right-of-way. There's no development or site alteration being proposed through this application. However, it is staff's understanding that the applicant does intend to develop the benefiting lands in the future. They're hoping to develop a single detached dwelling with an accessory garage. There is a site-specific zoning exception on the property that applies. It's in relation to an accessory structure, but it's not relevant to this application. That specific exception will be addressed when development is proposed and an application is received. The benefiting property is a waterfront property with a frontage on Gloucester Pool. It has an area of approximately 0.92 hectares and a frontage of approximately 71.11 meters. Here's 2018 aerial imagery of the subject property. Staff visited the site and conducted a site visit on September 27th, just confirming that the property is currently vacant with natural vegetation occurring. The subject property is designated rural lands in the PPS. It's designated waterfront area in the district official plan and is designated waterfront and other road in the township official plan. The property is zoned shoreline residential type 1 with exception 36. This exception limits the use to an accessory building and a driveway. No development is being proposed at this time, but staff do encourage the applicant to discuss with the planning department when development is being proposed. Based on a review of the relevant policies, planning staff are of the opinion that the application conforms to the general intent of the PPS, the district official plan, and the township official plan. Here's a survey showing the different ownership of Rocky Shore Road. The red is township land. That orangey color is Log Point. The green is Severn Lodge, and where that purple kind of arrow is Crown Lands. The subject property is over to the right here, next to the green Severn Lodge lands. Here's some site photos. This is as you approach the property, just showing the natural vegetation there. Here is a view of Rocky Shore Road from the subject property looking west and again, looking in the opposite direction to the east. Based on a review of the applicable policies, staff recommend the approval of the application subject to the following conditions. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take any questions you may have at this time.
You're muted, Mr.
You're
Hills.
muted, Tom.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bradford. Madam Secretary, has there been any correspondence in this application?
1 letter of no objection was received from the District of Muskoka.
Thank you. Is there anyone here from the applicant who would wish to address the committee? Go ahead, Mr. Ailes.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, committee members. I don't have anything particular to add. I just was here today mainly just to observe. I think it's fairly straightforward. And I thank Ali for her time putting that together.
Thank you very much. If there are no other comments, I'll close the public session and bring the application before the committee for discussion. And we will begin with Member Matthews.
Thank you, Chair Hill. Just I guess a question of curiosity. It looks like Mr. L's property is to the east of the road. And does the road start at the west end and work all the way through to Mr. L's property? Because I'm kind of curious as to why the various other properties are involved.
The question would be for Miss Bradford.
Miss Bradford or Miss Godette?
Yes, I can take that one. If you're picturing the survey, the road comes south and then goes either way. So the easement would provide the applicants with the legal access to go either east or west on Log Point, or sorry, rather on Rocky Road, and then up to the main road as well.
So I'm just curious, why would he need legal right to go to Log Point? Just a matter of curiosity.
Mr. Ells, you can respond to that.
Yeah, I don't need access. It's just that, so Rocky Shore Road is a private road, and it services all, I believe there's 15 cottages along there. And so there is a private like road association that looks after that entire road, and it just so happens to cross, 3 different parcels, so it's just captured under that. But I don't actually need access to that, like heading across Log Point, et cetera. It's just part of the same, I guess, title that everybody who accesses Rocky Shore, it gives title to the entire road.
Right, so it's just the entire road that you're covering. So, right.
Correct.
Thank you very much for that clarity.
Anything else, Mr. Matthews?
No, I would support this application.
Thank you very much. Member Jarvis.
Yeah, just further to, I'm just looking at the survey, and there's a part 6 running right through the middle of the property. Is that a road allowance that needs to be purchased or has been purchased, or is a right of way? What kind of right of way is that?
Again, Mr. Alves has got his hand up there. Go ahead.
That is a hydro easement. There is hydro road that lives.
Okay, then I guess my question is there going to have to be some approval down the road from Hydro with regards to any development on the property, just so Mr. Ellis knows that? Yeah, okay. Jen's giving me the nod. Okay. I mean, that's not part of this application. I'm just curious. And then I thought I had another. Yes. Ali, the first picture you showed just a moment ago indicated some equipment that was moving stuff around. Is there some landscaping going on that should or should not be happening at this time?
Through you, Chair Hill, to Member Jarvis. When I did conduct the site visit, there was an excavator on the property. It didn't look like any development had been done at that time. Maybe something along lines with the driveway. I'm not sure if the applicant would like to speak to that further.
Yes, you're exactly right. It's just a driveway that we brought. So this parcel was just, it's an empty building parcel. So we brought a driveway in. We are in the process. We will be submitting for building permit. I'm hoping in November. We're currently working on drawings. Survey happening next week, and Hydro is aware. I've contacted Hydro. They're working on a layout currently. We're aware of all the setbacks. I did a lot of due diligence last year, working with the township on zoning requirements and that sort of stuff. So we are aware of easement for the hydro, the setbacks, all that sort of stuff.
Okay, so then
that process we're hoping to go.
Well, if I might interject, that's really not part of this application, so I don't think we need to spend more time investigating what you're doing in the future. So are there any other questions you have, Member Jarvis?
Yeah, just following up, if this, is there site plan alteration effectively going on at this time, and is it permitted? That's my only question there.
So it's my understanding, when I read through the zoning and bylaws, that there's no permit required to put a driveway.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ailes. And Ms. Cadet, you had a comment?
Yes, we can look into that, Member Jarvis, with our enforcement. There is a tree cutting bylaw and a site alteration bylaw, so we can look into those.
Yeah, I know he's got to have a right to have access to his property. That doesn't bother me at all. It's just if there's something that should be if there should be some permitting that should be going on prior to that happening, maybe we should be looking into that. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Jarvis. Member Demkew.
Thank you, Chair Hill. Member Matthews asked the question I had in my mind about properties, but I have no problem with this. I'll support it.
Thank you very much. Member Ferguson.
Yes, kudos to Mr. Ailes and anyone else who helped do all the spade work to get this thing in order. There's a lot of work and a lot of time that goes into them, I know. So well done, and I have no objection to this severance whatsoever.
Thank you. Member Caddo.
Yeah, no objections here. I support this fully.
Thank you. Member Kuchar.
I also have no objections. I will admit I was a little confused with the part 2, part 6 until I blew the thing up to 400% or something. Then I saw the hydro easement title, and then it all started falling in place for me. But no, I have no objections to this.
Thank you very much. If there are no further questions, I will read the resolution. Moved by Member Demkew, seconded by Member Ferguson. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment hereby grants provisional approval to consent application B22-20 for a right-of-way, subject to the following conditions. 1, that municipal taxes shall be paid to date. 2, that a reference plan of the consent shall be prepared and duly registered by an Ontario land surveyor, and 1 copy filed with the Secretary Treasurer of the committee. A draft copy of the reference plan shall be provided to the Secretary Treasurer for review and approval prior to registration on title, if applicable. 3, that a copy of the electronic registration in preparation draft deed for the easement, if applicable, shall be provided to the Secretary Treasurer of the committee, together with a signed acknowledgement and direction, so that the consent certificate may be issued. 4, that all fees and disbursements, legal, engineering, and planning, if any, incurred by the township with respect to this application, will be paid for by the owner. And 5, that conditions set out herein shall be completed within 2 years of the date of the decision of the committee. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Thank you. The application is approved. The motion is carried. Thank you, everyone. And Madam Secretary, we will now move to our minor variances. And our next application is A17 or A22-17 for 134 Echo Bay Road. To the planner, please.
Hello again, Ali here. I will be taking you through application A22-17. I am getting feedback again. I'm not sure if you are, but I'm going to kindly follow in the leads of the CAO and ask you all to go on mute. That's better. Great. Okay, so this is a minor variance application to facilitate the redevelopment of the subject property by permitting a reduced front yard setback, a dwelling width increase, and a reduced setback between 2 accessory structures. Based on a review of the application and the applicable planning policies, staff are recommending approval of the application. The subject property is located along the shoreline of 6 Mile Lake. It has an area of approximately 0.61 hectares and a frontage of approximately 60.7 meters. There's currently a single detached dwelling on the property, as well as a sleeping cabin, a garden shed, a wood shed, a pump house, a privy, a detached garage, a playhouse, and a shore deck and a boat port. All of the structures are legally existing with the exception of the wood shed. It was constructed in 2013 without a building permit because it was under the 10 square meters. However, through a review of the application, it was determined that it does not comply with the setbacks, the separation setbacks, sorry, that are detailed in the zoning bylaw. And so as a result, staff have added an additional variance in through this application specifically for that. So here's 2018 aerial imagery of the subject property. The property abuts Crown Land at the east and is surrounded by Crown Land further south. A site visit conducted by staff on September 27th identified dense mature vegetation and a steep rocky shoreline. So here's the proposal. The applicant is proposing to redevelop the subject property by demolishing the existing dwelling and constructing a new single detached dwelling in roughly the same location, but they want to expand it further to the south and to the east. The proposed development would maintain both the existing front yard setback, which is 10.09 meters, as well as the existing dwelling width, which is 15.85 meters. The total GFA for the proposed dwelling would be approximately 241 square meters, and this works out to be an overall increase of 130 square meters from what is currently existing. Additionally, the applicant is proposing to reduce the building height from what's currently existing from 4.71 meters to 4.60 meters. The proposed development will have a total lot coverage of 7.8% within the 60 meters of the regulated water's edge and 6.89% for the entire lot. The subject property is designated rural lands in the PPS. It's designated waterfront area in the district official plan and identified as a deer wintering area and having moderate to high archaeological potential. The proposed development will be subject to site plan control to implement phosphorus management and impact mitigation measures. Based on a review of the relevant policies, planning staff are of the opinion that the application conforms to the general intent of the PPS and the district official plan. So moving on to the 4 tests, the first one being, does the application maintain the general intent and purpose of the OP? The applicant is proposing to redevelop the subject property for a single detached dwelling, which is a permitted use in the official plan. The official plan contains general provisions that permit a lesser setback to be considered if the proposal is for redevelopment of an existing lot and a net improvement to the on-site phosphorus management is achieved. The current existing dwelling is legal non-complying and it has a setback of approximately 10.09 meters from the shoreline. The applicant is proposing a new single detached dwelling that will maintain that existing front yard setback. There is a hydro line that bifurcates the lot to the rear of the existing dwelling. This restricts development to its current location and prevents an increased setback from the shoreline. The applicant intends to replace the existing septic system with a new high-performing system, so that will improve the on-site phosphorus management. And the applicant also notes that the shoreline vegetation will remain the same in its continued natural state. The proposed development will be subject to site plan control, and so any additional vegetation will be implemented as required. As such, staff are of the opinion that a net improvement to the on-site phosphorus management will be achieved and a lesser setback is therefore reasonable. The OP also contains principles for the 6 Mile Lake waterfront community, and it restricts dwelling width to 25% of the lot frontage, which in this case would be 15.17 meters. The existing dwelling is legal non-complying. It has a dwelling width of 15.85 meters. The applicant intends to maintain that width with the proposed development, and this works out to be an increase of 0.68 meters over what's permitted. The proposed development will be a 1-story dwelling that will be screened by the existing shoreline vegetation that's to remain the same. Staff are of the opinion that the visual impact from views from the water will be minimal and that a width increase of 0.68 meters is reasonable. Based on a review of the applicable policies, staff are of the opinion that the application conforms to the general intent of the official plan. Test number 2, does the application maintain the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw? The subject property is zoned shoreline residential type 6, SR6, and single detached dwellings are a permitted use in this zone. The application is requesting 3 variances, the first being to permit a reduced setback of 10.09 meters for the dwelling where 20 meters is required. As mentioned previously, the existing dwelling is legal non-complying. It has a setback of 10.09 meters from the shoreline at its closest point. The applicant is proposing a new single detached dwelling that will maintain that existing front yard setback. There's no change in their overall setback from what is currently existing. The proposed development will not encroach further into the front yard, and it complies with all other yard requirements for the dwelling. There will be mature trees that will need to be removed for the proposed development. However, correspondence from the applicant states that the shoreline vegetation will remain in its current and natural state. Additionally, the proposed development will be subject to site control, and so any additional vegetation will be implemented as required. As such, no additional visual impacts are anticipated, and the request for a reduced front yard setback of 10.09 meters for the proposed development is reasonable. The second variance is to permit a width of 15.85 meters for the dwelling, where a maximum width of 15.17 meters is permitted. The width of the existing dwelling is 15.85 meters, and the proposed development will maintain that width. So again, there's no change from what's existing to what is proposed. A maximum width of 25% of the lot frontage is permitted. This works out to be 15.17 meters in this case. The application is proposing an increase of 0.68 meters over what is permitted. The proposed development will utilize part of the existing dwelling footprint and will extend further to the east and the south. It will also be reduced in height from what is currently existing by approximately 0.11 meters. This will help make it less visible from the water. The shoreline is currently occupied by mature trees and vegetation, and it's staff's understanding that the shoreline vegetation will remain as is. Based on the above, the request for the width increase is reasonable. The last variance has to do with permitting a reduced setback between accessory structures. There is currently 1 garden shed, wood shed, and 1 privy located on the subject property that are less than 5 meters apart. The privy was constructed in approximately 1954, and it's a legally existing structure. The garden shed was constructed in 2018 with a building permit, so it's a legally existing structure. The wood shed was constructed in 2013. However, it did not require a building permit because of its size. That being said, the separation distance between the privy and the wood shed is approximately 2.87 meters, which does not comply with the zoning bylaw. The structures are located behind the existing dwelling and meet all other height and yard requirements. Based on the above, the staff are of the opinion that the variance for a reduced separation distance between the accessory structures is reasonable. Based on an analysis of the proposal and the applicable policies, staff are of the opinion that the proposed variances conform to the general intent of the zoning bylaw. On to test number 3, is it desirable? The property is zoned for residential and accessory uses and is generally compatible with the surrounding development. The proposed development does not encroach further into the front yard than what is already existing, and the proposed width is the same as what is currently existing as well. The proposed development is below the maximum GFA requirements for the 6 Mile Lake community as detailed in the zoning bylaw, and the majority of the proposed development is located behind the front wall of the existing dwelling. The proposed development may have some additional visual impact from the shoreline, but the cumulative visual impact when viewed as an extension of the existing dwelling is minimal. Additionally, the proposed development has no significant impacts on the surrounding features such as fish habitat or the surrounding lake environment. As such, planning staff are of the opinion that subject to the recommended conditions, the proposed minor variances are appropriate and desirable development for the subject property. The last test being, is it minor? The applicant is requesting a front yard setback of 10.09 meters where 20 meters is required. The existing dwelling is legally existing non-complying and has a front yard setback of 10.09 meters. The proposed development intends to maintain that existing front yard setback and will not encroach further into the front yard. The proposed development complies with all other yard setback requirements and no significant visual or environmental impacts are anticipated for neighboring properties. As such, the request for a reduced front yard setback is reasonable and considered minor in nature. The applicant is also requesting a width of 15.85 meters for the dwelling, where a maximum width of 15.17 meters is permitted. The existing dwelling is legally existing non-complying and has a width of 15.85 meters. The proposed development will maintain the width as is already existing for a total increase of 0.68 meters over what is permitted. The majority of the proposed development is located behind the front wall of the existing dwelling, and the shoreline vegetation will remain. No significant visual impacts for neighboring properties are anticipated, and as such, the request for width increase is reasonable and considered minor in nature. The last variance requested is to permit a reduced separation distance of approximately 2.87 meters between the existing wood shed and the privy. Both structures currently exist on the property and are located to the rear of the existing dwelling. The structures meet all other height and yard requirements as detailed in the zoning bylaw, and as such, the request for a reduced setback between accessory structures is reasonable and considered minor. Planning staff are of the opinion that, subject to the recommended conditions, the proposed minor variances are minor. Here's a drawing of the proposed development. And then the following slides are site photos. So here is the subject property when you're approaching it from the water. Here's a view of the dwelling and the proposed dwelling footprint. And then an additional photo of the existing cottage from the shoreline, just showing the vegetation and the screening. Based on a review of the application and the applicable planning policies, staff recommend that the committee approve the minor variance application A2217, subject to the following conditions. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bradford. Madam Secretary, has there been correspondence on this application?
4 letters of support were received from Jim and Rhonda Locke, John and Sandra Wycraft, Ronnie and Annette Bozart, and Sandy and Brian McRoy.
Thank you. I see we have Mr. Tom Wright in attendance. Is there anything that you wish to add to what the planner has presented so far?
Well, thank you very much for considering our application today. I would say that we've been cottagers on the lake for over 50 years, and stewardship of the land has been first and foremost. When we embarked upon this plan to build a new cottage, very specifically, our objective was to have a minimal change in terms of view from the canoe. And as a result, what we've got is a bungalow style structure. We specifically did not want a large 2-story cottage, which would be a visible icon from the water's edge. As to cottage width, interestingly, the original cottage complies, as Ali has pointed out. It was built, I believe, using the original surveys, which specifically say the shoreline is 212 feet, which interestingly would make it legal in terms of width. The setback, we're really tight up against that hydro wire. Trying to move that is a not only expensive proposition, but would compromise a huge number of trees to move a huge number of hydro poles. Not something that I would appreciate, nor would cottagers in the area. And so we're working with a very restricted piece of land to try and build something which would be, yes, larger, but from the water's edge, largely unchanged. The site has been chosen to minimize loss of trees, minimize any additional site alteration. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wright. Is there any member of the public in attendance that wish to comment on this application? And I don't see any members of the public, so I will close the public session and bring the application before the committee for any questions or comments. And we'll begin with Member Jarvis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have no questions with regards to this application. Thank you.
Okay, Member Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I find it interesting when you first read the application, you know, a 20-meter setback, they're requesting a 10-meter, and it's deemed as being minor. But until you get into the meat of the application, you realize what the applicant is doing is very well thought out. So I have no problems. I mean, the setback is not changing, the width is not changing, the height is being reduced, the square footage is below what's allowed. But I would also like to comment to staff, and particularly to Ali, the chart that you had in that portion of the application, Ali, I found extremely useful to see the comparison as to what is allowed, what is there, and what is being asked for. So thank you very much for that. And I would support this application.
Thank you, Member Matthews. Member Ferguson.
I echo the comments of Mr. Matthews. I'm in favor of this application.
Thank you. A Member Kuchar.
Thank you. Well, I have no objections. I just like to make one or two observations. I was confused as oh heck when I looked at this and saying, how can you maintain the same width when clearly the building has been is significantly farther to the south, until I realized that the existing, especially the tallest part, the existing is being destroyed. And even though the footprint's exactly the same width, it's been moved, I'll say 5 meters, because I didn't get out my ruler, but moved 5 meters to the south, which threw me for a loop for a while. And then it started making sense. The other thing that I was surprised by, based on the photos, is the existing cottage you tell us is 111 square meters. Looks bigger than that to me, but then, you know, I could be deceived. And I didn't know whether that included the basement, whether the basement under the one section was included in that 111 meters, and whether it was of a height that should be included. But that's a minor detail because it's going to be gone. But just one observation. I was confused by it, but once I got into the fine print of the eventually realized that on the second survey where they're showing the proposed and they show existing, but of course that existing is to be removed, I presume, otherwise it would all be offside. So once I figured all that out, I find myself agreeing with my the members, fellow members have spoken so far that I have no objection. Might even be more hidden with the trees in the new location than the current one.
Thank you, Member Kuchar. Member Caddo.
Yeah, no problem, sure. I'd agree with Member Coiter. It's I think it's gonna be more hidden from what it is now. So definitely no objection, sure.
Thank you, Member Demke.
Thank you, Chair Hill. I guess my comments were taken up by Mr. Matthews. I thought Ali's presentation really helped me understand a little bit about what was going on, and Mr. Wright explained that he's doing things to keep all of the right things going. So absolutely good presentations, and I'll support this.
Thank you, Member Demke. And just my own observations, a tremendous amount of work done, Mr. Wright, to make sure that the existing vegetation, everything has been maintained, some really mature trees. However, somebody there's a really good carpenter and a really good landscaper, because you've maintained access to all the important places and kept it looking like it was there from the beginning. So congratulations to you on that. So with that, I will bring the application. I will read the resolution. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment approves minor variance application A 22-17 to zoning bylaw 2014-75 as amended for 134 Echo Bay Road to facilitate the redevelopment of the subject property with a single detached dwelling by permitting a minimum front yard setback of 10.09 meters, a maximum dwelling width of 15.85 meters, and a reduced setback between accessory structures of 2.87 meters with the following conditions. A, that municipal taxes are paid to date. B, that a site plan control application be submitted and approved, and that a site plan agreement be executed detailing proposed development in the manner prescribed by the applicable policies of the Township of Georgian Bay official plan as they relate to the administration of site plan control. And that approval of this variance is granted and fixed to the subject site plan extent, location, scale, and use contemplated in the application. And that approval of this variance expires 3 years from the date of decision if building permits have not been issued for the approved structure. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Thank you. The motion is carried and the application is approved. Thank you. Our next minor variance application is number A22-10 for 2 Island 740. To the planner, please.
Good morning, members of the committee. Erin here with JL Richards. I'll be speaking on behalf of this application. I do just want to note that I am losing my voice. I have a bit of a sore throat today, so you might need to turn up the volume on your on your computers or your devices. So we are looking at application A22-10. The address of this is 2 Island 740. The applicants are Mark Diamond and Barbara Lieber, and they have their agent who is with Flow Drawings and Design, Inc. And I do believe that they are all in attendance today. For just a brief overview, the purpose of this application is to permit the construction of a dwelling with a front yard setback of 5.9 meters, to recognize the existing shed with a front yard setback of 0.7 meters and a rear yard setback of 4.77 meters, and to permit development in the shoreline activity area. So here is a location map of the subject property. So it's just east of Beau Soleil. It's on partially on one island, and then they also have a small piece on another island as well. But we are looking at the severed island. That is where their structures are. So here is the aerial imagery. This is from 2018. You'll note that there is an existing dwelling on the property. The applicants do intend on removing that dwelling. There are 2 decks I'll show you in a second. One of the decks will remain. The second deck and the dwelling will be removed, and a new dwelling is going to be constructed, generally in the same footprint. So here is the site plan. You can see with the dashed lines where the current dwelling is. It's measured at about 105.4 square meters. Deck A is on the southern portion of the property. Deck B extends to the western side. So it's Deck B that will be removed and Deck A will remain. The proposed new dwelling will be about 144.2 square meters. So it is a bit larger than what's currently there. The existing dwelling has a setback from the high water mark of 5.7 meters, and the proposed new dwelling will be at 5.9 meters. So they are moving slightly further away from the high water mark than what is currently there. You'll notice also the shed that we have down on the southeast corner of the property. That's also being looked at today to acknowledge the reduced front and rear yard setback. Here are some site photos. These were taken by staff on September 23rd. So this is facing, looking north. So this is the southern and sort of southeastern shore of the property. You can partially see the shed that's on the property and a little bit of the dwelling, but due to the trees and vegetation on the property, it is fairly covered from this side. Now this is on the north side of the property, looking in a southeast direction. It's a bit more exposed rock. You can also see the trees there as well. So the dwelling on this property is the one that's sort of on the right-hand side of the screen. The dwelling on the left-hand side is the abutting property. So I'm just going to go high level overview of the 4 tests. So I do want to note that the property is located within 120 meters of type 1 fish habitat. It's located on the southern and eastern shores of the property. It's also located within 15 meters of the Roberts Island provincially significant wetland. And that's on the north, south, and eastern side of the property. They did have an environmental impact study completed, which concluded that provided the recommended mitigation measures are implemented, the proposed development is not anticipated to have any negative impacts. This has also been peer reviewed by Hutchinson Environmental Sciences that came to the same conclusion. They did provide 2 further comments just to strengthen the EIS. And so it's recommended that as a condition of variance that the comments that Hutchinson provided be implemented by Azimuth Environmental Consulting, as well as the mitigation measures presented in the initial EIS. So the property is designated waterfront in the township official plan, and it is located in the Honey Harbor Coastal Waterfront Community. Under the OP, development is permitted provided that it has regard for the natural environment and the character of the area. So again, the proposed dwelling will be in generally the same location as what's currently there. So it's tough to see from the shoreline, from that southeastern shoreline due to the vegetation. It is located within the required 20-meter setback. Again, it is slightly further back than what's currently there. It'll be at 5.9 meters. And they have demonstrated that there is insufficient lot dimensions to accommodate the dwelling. So I will backtrack a little bit here. Can you see my mouse on the screen? Yes, okay. To the west of the property, of the dwelling, sorry, they have their septic system, the existing septic system, and that will remain. So that impacts their ability to move the dwelling to the west. They are within their shoreline front yard setback here down on the southern shore. Going north, that piece of the property is at a higher elevation. So if they move the dwelling further back, it'll be a higher elevation and more easily visible from all sides of the island. So by maintaining the current area, they're actually preserving the character of the area and sort of that canoe and boat view towards the water. And again, by utilizing the existing footprint generally, they're minimizing the impact of the development on the property and the amount of the lot that will be developed. And then, sorry, I'll just move forward. Again, we have our EIS, which ultimately doesn't anticipate any negative impacts. Looking at the intent of the zoning bylaw, the property is zoned shoreline residential island type 1. So the dwelling does not conform to the front yard setback of 20 meters. As mentioned, they have insufficient lot dimensions on this property, and they'll be using generally the same location of the existing dwelling, and it will be slightly further back. For the garden, or for the shed, it is set back about 0.7 meters from the high water mark and 4.77 meters from the rear lot line. This structure has been there for about 5 years. It did not meet the requirements of needing a building permit due to its size. It's not easily visible due to the vegetation. It does not impact the surrounding properties. With regards to the development in the natural state and shoreline area, so all properties that are zoned shoreline residential or shoreline residential island have the lands within 15 meters of the high water mark are put into a natural state area and are meant to be preserved. They are permitted to have some development, which is known as the shoreline activity area, of about 25% or up to 23 meters. And this is intended to provide access to the water and to permit these shoreline accessory structures. So in this case, it's the dwelling that would be within that shoreline activity area. Based off the information provided by the applicant, the agent, and the surveyor, it's only going to be about 8% of that shoreline activity area that would have the dwelling. So it's well within that maximum percentage of 25%. Looking at the desirability and appropriateness of the development, again, utilizing generally the same footprint of the existing dwelling, so minimizing the area of the lot that's impacted by development. With regards to the shed, it's not easily visible from the shoreline. It doesn't appear to impact the surrounding properties. And that 8% shoreline activity, again, is within that 25% that's permitted. It's just for the dwelling as opposed to accessory structures. And then looking at, is this minor? Ultimately, we do believe that it is minor, as the environmental impact assessment did state that they don't anticipate any negative impacts from this. Utilizing the same location, it's not going to be impacting the character of that area too much, and the shed is existing. We're just recognizing the location, and it doesn't appear to impact abutting properties. So I am running out of steam here a little bit. That is my overview. We are recommending approval, subject to some conditions. I'm just going to highlight a couple of them. So we do recommend that it be subject to site plan control, that the comments provided by Hutchinson Environmental Assessment be addressed by the environmental consulting firm that completed the EIS and to the satisfaction of the township, and that the recommendations of the EIS all be addressed by the applicant. So with that, I'll pass it back over to the committee, and if there's any questions, I can answer them at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. Madam Secretary, has there been any correspondence on this application?
No correspondence has been received.
Okay, thank you very much. I see that we have the applicant in attendance. Mr. Diamond, do you have any comments you wish to add to what the planner has presented?
I'd just like to say thank you to the planning committee, Mr. Chair, and to the planning department for considering our application. We're very happy with all of the conditions that were listed. I've been cottaging there. My 4th birthday was at the cottage. It was like 2 weeks after my parents bought. Been coming, really my whole life, and looking forward to making it a little bit more snug to use it in the spring and fall going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that wishes to add comment to the planner's presentation? Okay, I see we have Ms. Hoffman in attendance. There's nothing you wish to add, I take it. So with that, I will close the public portion of the application and bring the matter before the committee for any questions or comments. And we will begin with Member Coutier.
Thank you, Chair Hill. Looking at all this, I think it's quite a reasonable application. I'm quite impressed with the very thorough environmental assessment report that was attached to this application, and appreciate the recommendations that they have made and that they are conditions of this approval. So under those conditions, I have no objection.
Thank you very much. Member Ferguson. You are muted, Mr. Ferguson.
I have no objections either. This is a small piece of property, and I think they've done a good job to try and work in a little larger cottage in a very tight area.
Thank you. Member Jarvis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Legal non-complying to me always implies that we shouldn't be allowing, or there should be some real restrictions on allowing anything bigger. Having said that, I appreciate the work that's been done on this. I do have a question with regards to the redevelopment. In the future, if there is a future application that comes forward that is further enlarging this legal non-complying new residents, would there be any restrictions as a result of what we're doing here today?
Thank you through the chair to Member Jarvis. So as the existing dwelling, it is a legal non-complying structure, but as it's being removed in its entirety, the proposed dwelling is being assessed as a new dwelling and not an expansion or redevelopment, or sorry, not as an expansion or enlargement of that non-complying structure. Excuse me, just a second. Thank you. So today, should the committee grant approval, they would receive their building permit in the future once all the conditions are cleared up, and then this building would be considered a legal non-complying structure. And in the future, the provisions under 4.11E in the zoning bylaw, which does allow for some expansion, would apply to that, and they would be constrained by those provisions.
Is there, okay, so is there any way we, in this circumstance here, can put any future restrictions on development, on further development?
Yes, as the committee, you do have the authority to put in a provision like that. So for example, you could add a condition that would restrict any future development of the dwelling, future expansion. You could establish their maximum GFA as what's being proposed today. So there's a couple ways that you could input a condition that would restrict future development or future expansion of the proposed dwelling.
I would really appreciate it if we could consider that, Mr. Chair. Again, I'm in sympathy with the owner on the property. I don't really have any issues with the redevelopment as is proposed. I am concerned, and maybe Mr. Diamond can address this in future, but that at least one post on that deck is right at the high water mark, so there could be implications if the water goes back up again. But that's only with consideration to the deck possibly being destroyed by the ice. But other than that, I really would like to see that we have some restrictions imposed on this development post rebuild, or whatever you want to call that.
So if I can say, we have no intention to add further to the building after this, and frankly, probably don't have any money to do it either. So
You don't, and I sympathize again, but there's always a possibility of a future owner looking at that. Not that you have any intentions, obviously, on selling by the sounds of it, but we've got to consider what happens down the road here. So, Mr. Chair, if you could consider something along those lines, I'd really appreciate it.
Okay, I take it from your remark, Mr. Diamond, that you don't have any objection to having future expansion restriction on the property, and what we would do, and I would ask the Secretary Treasurer to properly amend the resolution, is that we would use the proposed GFA as the maximum development for that property. And if you would wordsmith that a little bit, Marcia, we will, when we get to the reading of the resolution, we can address that.
Thank you.
Okay, Member Caddo.
Yeah, no problems here. I've been up the property, and like you say, it's not much room to work, and it's going to be well hidden from the shore and the neighbors. Anyways, yeah, definitely no objections here.
Okay, thank you. Member Demke.
Thank you, Chair Hill. When I first looked at the application, I'm looking at the percentages of the setbacks against what's required. But listening to Erin's presentation, she addressed every single concern I would have had and why it's the way it is. So I'm absolutely in support of this.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Demke. Mr. Matthews.
Thank you, Chair Hill. I would support this. And the island Mr. Diamond owns looks like it's fairly low lying, and maybe he's got insight that the water will not come back up anymore, which would be good for some of us on Georgian Bay. I have to admit, I am a little concerned with Member Jarvis's request. I'm not sure that it's our position to further restrict any possibility of development. I don't think Mr. Diamond has any intentions of it. But correct me if I'm wrong, if he does, would he not have to come back to the current Committee of Adjustments at that time?
I see a nod there from Ms. Gaudette. Can you confirm whether or not future expansion would require another minor variance?
Hi, through you to all the members of committee. We would need to know what they were looking at. For example, you could expand height, which would give you potentially higher GFA without moving your setbacks. Our preference would be that There is no additional restriction in that the applicants be free to make an application that we would assess based on the merits of that application if they were to do it at the time. It just makes it easier for everybody, and we don't know how things are going to change, what owner might, a future owner might want to do. So our preference is we just leave the conditions as is, and if another application comes forward, we deal with that when it comes forward.
Okay, thank you very much. You agree with that, Ms. Reed?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
I think, Peter,
I'm sorry?
I'm wondering if I could ask a question.
I'm sorry, I didn't notice your hand up there, Mr. Member Kuchar. Please proceed.
Well, I'm curious because I noticed on the survey that the proposed cottage and shed, if I got the number correct here, represents 5.6% of the area above 177.4 meters. And I wonder if the planning department can confirm, is 7% the limit in this zoning?
I'm just going to pull up my notes here. That's correct, Councillor Kutsier. The maximum lot coverage in the SRI 1 is 7%, and they're at about 5.6%.
So I'm not sure. I find myself disagreeing with Member Jarvis in the sense that I don't think it's appropriate for us to decide that this particular lot should have a lower lot coverage limit than any other lot with similar zoning.
Point is well taken. I see a hand up from Member Jarvis. Is there something you wish to add?
I would like to, but I think we should hear from the rest of the committee first before I go on with my questions. I don't think we've heard from Member Demke yet.
We have.
We have, okay. If we've got everybody covered, and this will be to our planners. If this property was undeveloped, this is hypothetical, guys, and if I'm way off track, just tell me to shut up and I'll move on. But hypothetically speaking, if there was nothing on this property, what would be allowed as a brand new application?
Thank you, through the chair to Councilor Member Jarvis. If this was a vacant property, they would be permitted their single detached dwelling. They would be permitted a maximum lot coverage of 7%. They would have to conform to the setbacks of the bylaw. So again, 20-meter front yard setback. This is a severed island, so essentially everything that's touching the water, that's all their front yard. It's just that one lot line that abuts their neighboring property. That's their rear lot line. So it'd be 20 meters all along the shoreline, and again, I'll just double check. I don't want to give false information. It's a 10-meter rear yard setback. So due to the size of this property, they would be constrained as it is an undersized lot. So we would have to see a proposal at that time to determine whether or not it conforms to the bylaw, but they would still be permitted to develop.
They're permitted to seek development.
To seek development permit, yes.
Right, and then it would be up to us or planning council to decide whether they meet the requirements laid out in our bylaws, correct? And setbacks would be the issue. I'm not arguing anything else, but the setbacks are obviously
setbacks may be an issue. I didn't look at it that way to see, where do they have a building envelope that would conform to all of these setbacks. So if they were unable to meet any of the setbacks, then they would have to either come forward with a minor variance or a zoning bylaw amendment application to get permission to build where they don't comply to the zoning bylaw. But I haven't looked at it as a vacant property, so they might be able to. I don't know.
Okay, no, I understand, and I'll just go back. I think I'm finding myself obviously in disagreement with a number of people on the committee, which is fine. I do think that we should be at this time restricting what happens down the road and just making it clear to people that future development would not be something we'd want. But that's up to the rest of the committee to decide. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Member Jarvis. And I get a distinct impression that the resolution as drafted may be appropriate. So I'll read the resolution, and we can vote from there. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment approves minor variance application A 22-10 to zoning bylaw 2014-75 as amended for 2 Island 740 to permit the construction of a dwelling with a front yard setback of 5.8 meters, recognize the existing shed with a front yard setback of 0.7 meters and a rear yard setback of 4.77 meters, and to permit development in the shoreline activity area and the natural state with the following conditions. A, that municipal taxes are paid to date. B, that a site plan control approval application be submitted and approved, and that a site plan agreement be executed detailing the proposed development and the preservation of vegetation protection areas within the front yard in a manner prescribed by the applicable policies of the Township of Georgian Bay official plan as they relate to administration of site plan control. And that the comments provided by Hutchinson Environmental Services be addressed by Azimuth Environmental Consulting in a revised environmental impact assessment to the satisfaction of the town. And that the recommendations provided, the revised environmental impact assessment completed by Azimuth Environmental Consulting be addressed by the applicant to the satisfaction of the township. Further, any mitigation measures recommended through this application shall be implemented through site plan control. And E, that approval of this variance is granted and fixed to the subject site plan, extent, location, scale, and use contemplated in the application. And that approval of this variance expires 3 years from the date of decision if building permits have not been issued for the approved structure. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. The motion is carried and the application is approved. Thank you very much. I am going to suggest a 5-minute bio break at this time. I noticed a couple of the coffee cups are getting empty and others are, so we will reconvene in 5 minutes at 11:40. Thank you.
Very observant of you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Very well, everyone. Welcome back. And our next application is A21-25 for 89 Sunrise Trail. To the planner, please.
Good morning, Chair Hill and members of committee. I'm just going to be sharing my screen. Please advise if you can see correctly.
Yes,
Alright,
we can
so
see.
Yes.
amazing. Let me just. I'm hearing a little bit of feedback again. If everyone could please mute, that would be great. Thank you. All right, so today I will be presenting minor variance application A2125 for 89 Sunrise Trail. The applicant for this proposal is Kyle Scott. Their agent is John Jackson Planner Inc. in the care of John Jackson, and the address is 89 Sunrise Trail. An overview of this application is to recognize the as-built expansion of a legally existing non-confined dwelling by 88%, while a maximum gross floor area expansion of 40% is permitted. Additionally, this application is for the recognition of the approximate height of 9 meters for the existing dwelling, as well as the as-built expansion. For a little history on the property, the applicant constructed an addition to an existing non-compliant dwelling on the subject property without the benefit of a building permit and is now seeking to retroactively legalize the expansion. The applicant submitting a building permit application as a result of an order to comply and stop work order on the property issued by the Township's Building Department on April 9th, 2021. The expansion was analyzed for compliance to the zoning bylaw and deficiencies were noted. The minor variance application stems from a June 2021 pre-consultation conducted by Township planning staff. Upon further review of the development, staff had since advised that a zoning bylaw amendment is the more appropriate Planning Act application. However, the applicant has chosen to proceed through a minor variance. Here's the approximate location of the subject property. As kind of discussed further earlier in a previous application, some of the lot lines may be a little skewed. However, this is just an aerial view for your consideration. The property is located on the western shores of Gloucester Pool and is municipally addressed as 89 Sunrise Trail. The area of the subject property is approximately 0.55 hectares, and the frontage along the shoreline is approximately 54 meters. The subject property is serviced privately and accessed through a municipal road and is occupied by the existing main dwelling, garage, boathouse, docks, sauna sheds, and a private septic system. For your consideration, I've provided a picture of the dwelling prior to the expansion. This was taken by the applicant and was provided in the EIS included as part of this package. Site photos taken on September 27, 2022 identify additional shoreline structures, including a deck, dock, and stair system that were not constructed with the benefit of a building permit. There appears there was additional construction to the dwelling and other shoreline structures following the issuance of the order to comply and stop work order of April 9, 2021. These matters have been forwarded to the Township's Chief Building Official and Senior Municipal Law Enforcement Officer for planning for further investigation. As you can see on the right here, this was the dwelling and shoreline taken at the time of the environmental impact assessment, was approximately August 2021. And on the left here, you can see the dwelling taken through photos by staff on September 27th, which shows the dwelling, works done, and some shoreline structures. Further, you can see additional shoreline structures and gravel beach present on the property. Again here as well. Additionally, we can see the decks here and walkways without a building permit. I should note that the boathouse and shed are legally existing non-complying structures that have just since been aesthetically re-sided. No issues with those structures. I provided a site plan for your consideration, confirming the setback of the dwelling from the high water mark of 10.01 meters. Through the policy framework, an analysis was done. Through the provincial policy statement, the lands are classified as rural. In the district official plan, the lands are classified as waterfront and within 120 meters of a provincially significant wetland and having high to very high archaeological potential. In the township official plan, the lands are identified as being waterfront within 120 meters of a provincially significant wetland and adjacent to type 2 fish habitat. Through the zoning bylaw, the lands are zoned shoreline residential type 1 or SR1. Through an analysis of the provincial policy statement, planning staff have determined that the application is consistent with development policies within the PPS and residential development is a permitted use. As per the District of Muskoka official plan, planning staff are of the opinion that the application does not conform to the applicable policies in the Muskoka official plan. Low-density residential development is permitted use in the waterfront area. However, there are additional considerations that do not make it conform. This is due to Hutchinson identifying multiple deficiencies that must be addressed in a revised environmental impact assessment. Addressal of peer review comments will further quantify if current and potential impacts to the adjacent PSW or other environmental features are identified. Further, there appears that there is no visual barrier shielding the expansion from the shoreline. Further, the built form of the shoreline is not consistent with the desired natural appearance of the waterfront area. We move to the 4 tests of the minor variance. The first is the maintaining the general intent of the Township of Georgian Bay official plan, and is of the opinion of planning staff that the application does not conform to the general intent of the official plan. Residential uses are permitted and are consistent with the surrounding properties. Additionally, site plan agreement would be required to implement recommendations identified in the peer review of the environmental impact assessment. The construction of such a large addition within a natural shoreline area without any visual buffers is not consistent in maintaining the character of the waterfront designation. Further, the built form of the shoreline is not consistent with maintaining the underdeveloped appearance of the shoreline. Additional opportunities to remediate these impacts through a revised environmental impact assessment and thorough remediation plan, as identified through peer review by Hutchinson, is required. Further, there is substantial visual impacts resulting from the dwelling expansion. Next is the maintaining of the township zoning bylaw, and it's planning staff's opinion that the application does not maintain the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. For the first variance requested, permitting the GFA expansion beyond what is legally permitted, the expansion exceeds the maximum gross floor area expansion for any legally existing non-complying dwellings, regardless of the setback. Additionally, there is substantial development in the natural state shoreline area that appears to exceed the permitted allowance. Additionally, there are impacts of these works on surrounding environmental features must be further quantified in a revised environmental impact assessment to the satisfaction of the township. For the second variance requested, permitting the height of the expansion of 9 meters, which is maintaining the height of the existing dwelling. However, it exceeds the permitted allowance. While the proposed expansion does not exceed the height above what is legally existing, the expansion does exceed the maximum permitted height as permitted by section 411E and within the SR1 zone. For appropriate and desirable development, it is the planning staff's opinion the application is not appropriate and desirable development of the subject lands and is not suitable in accordance with the overall goals and objectives of the township. While the use of the property for low density residential development is consistent with surrounding properties, the redevelopment of the dwelling beyond the permitted expansion for legally existing non-complying dwellings to a height of 9 meters is not appropriate waterfront development. Further, the development does not maintain the naturalized shoreline views, and the peer review comments must be further addressed in the revised environmental impact assessment to better understand impacts to environmental features. And now an analysis on the 4th test. If it is minor, planning staff are of the opinion that the proposed variances are not minor. The expansion exceeds the permissible gross floor area for any legally existing non-compliant dwellings. The expansion of the dwelling and construction of other shoreline structures has not been analyzed effectively to determine whether there are any environmental impacts associated with this development. Further, there are outstanding peer review comments that must be addressed in a revised environmental impact assessment. And there are substantial visual impacts as a result of the removal of trees and the construction of the dwelling and additional shoreline structures. It is planning staff's opinion that Committee of Adjustment deny this application for the reasons stated within the presentation and the report. For your consideration, there are also additional resolutions for more of an ease of understanding and consideration and making it easier on our Secretary Treasurer should you choose that route. I'm happy to answer any questions at this time. Thank you.
You're muted, Mr. Hill.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gansos. Madam Secretary, has there been any further, any correspondence on this application?
One letter of support was received from Marnie MacArthur.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have the applicant or his agent in attendance? And if so, would they wish to add any comments to what the planner has presented so far?
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chair. My name is David Heppenstall. I'm a lawyer, and I'm speaking on behalf of the applicant, Kyle Scott. Planner John Jackson is also in attendance to speak to this matter. As my friend outlined, I'll raise my hand. There we go. As my friend outlined, Mr. Scott makes an application for a minor variance regarding 89 Sunrise Trail. It's a seasonal cottage on the waterfront, zoned shoreline residential type 1, and Mr. Scott is the property owner. As a brief note of context, and as my friend remarked, this is a retroactive application, and Mr. Scott is extremely regretful and remorseful that the renovations were carried out without a permit. So with the appropriate degree of humility, I will be using the word proposed to refer to the expansion. The proposed use is a proposed building in addition to a legal non-complying wood-clad dwelling. The dwelling is 10.01 meters from the front lot line at its closest point, and this distance places the proposal within zoning bylaw 4.11 sub E sub 2 paragraph 1. And this provision limits the growth of the dwelling gross floor area to 40%. And so with reference to the application, in this case, the limit would prevent a 166.2 square meter building from expanding to more than 232.68 square meters. And the proposal would permit the gross floor area to grow to 312.53 square meters. The difference between these numbers, the 79.85 square meters, is the reason for seeking the minor variance in the application. However, these numbers don't reflect the reality of the building or of the renovation. The appropriate calculation of the gross floor area properly includes the covered deck structures and open sunroom area, which are integral to the building structure, and they're atop the same foundation. And this more expansive definition is consistent with the definition of the gross floor area, which appears on page 193 of the zoning bylaw. Well, I won't read the whole thing, but in part it reads, included in gross floor area are porches, screened porches, sunrooms, and any attached structure or any area under a roof overhang. The proposal would see the structure essentially expand into and over the existing porch.
Excuse me, Mr. Happenstall. I just, it seems that you're engaged on a long road here of, and I'm having a difficult time understanding where you're going with this discussion. Could you perhaps give us a very concise summary as to, what points you're trying to make, and then we can go back and fill in the detail?
Of course, it wasn't my intention to go into a long road. In fact, I'm almost done, but in as concisely as I can be, in round numbers, what's there is 276 square meters. What's allowed is 387. What's proposed is 390, being a difference in excess of 3 meters. And so generally speaking, the planning opinion, the environmental impact assessment, and the peer review of the latter all support the proposal. John Jackson can also speak to the 4 tests in more detail, and perhaps that's the crux that you're looking for, Mr. Hill.
Okay, then thank you for that. And I'm sure that if there are questions, we can get back to you on that. Perhaps, Mr. Jackson, you could provide us with a summary of what the applicant's position is here.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. John here. I'm hoping I was in on an earlier file, but I didn't see my location in the meeting, but here I am. So this application was presented, as the planners indicated with the background, to the planning department to assess getting a building permit for the addition. One of the things that was alluded to was a consultation memo from the planner at the time of Brad Oster, which outlined, I think, 5 or 6 criteria that would be required before the planning department could recommend approval with the building department. One of those was the need for a planning report. Somehow Mr. Scott found me, and here I am. I think that the committee needs to understand that the proposal is to really round out, if you like, the proposed addition on the existing platforms. The building is a little over 10 meters from the water, and it's not getting any closer. So being a non-complying building, it's entitled to expand its footprint by as much as 40%. But what you'll see is that to do half of the expansion is going to be 48% for an additional 79 square meters. And I think the critical part of all this is that there are no further disturbances, which are critical to what I'll call the planner's assessment in her report, almost treating it like a greenfield. And I think that it's important. It's an important distinction with respect to the Scott's addition here, because it really rounds out, as I describe it, the building on the existing series of decks. And so in my analysis, I would disagree that the 4 tests have been, in fact, not been reached. I think that in terms of the policies of the official plan, this is a single family dwelling, a low density single tier, typical on the waterways of the municipality. I don't see any violation with this official plan, nor did the district take a position against the conformity issue with the Muskoka official plan. In terms of the maintaining the general purpose and intent of the zoning bylaw, it's my opinion that the actual principle of allowing for some expansions to these kinds of situations is very clear. It's an entitlement that had we come in at less than 79 square meters, that we wouldn't have an application before the committee. I do not believe there's any conflict in terms of the official plan and the zoning as far as the first 2 tests are concerned. And to be honest, I was having trouble following the disagreement on the second test with the analysis in the planner's report. In terms of desirable and appropriateness, if you look carefully at the before and after picture, it looks like the original cottage design wasn't symmetrical in terms of its presentation, and it looked like it could use a second sort of peaked end of the cottage to round it off. So it's my view that it's more desirable and certainly more functional as an expansion would allow it to be. And if you look at the before and after pictures, you'll see that there really were no disturbances beyond the existing structure, which was confirmed in the survey that was required by the Brad Oster report of June 22nd, 2021. And finally, whether or not it's minor, we all know as committees learned over the years that this is an assessment based on what impacts are likely to take place. And again, if you look carefully, there is a very little amount of true impact. One tree was removed that was in the way of the addition. And if you look carefully at the recommendation of Mr. Scott's environmental consultant, that they recommended plantings, and we have no problem. And I think that the essence of the peer review, which incidentally wasn't required at the time the environmental impact study was done, was also more or less saying undertake some additional plantings. In terms of the impacts, usually we expect to hear from neighbors if there's any perceived impacts, and clearly that didn't take place with respect to this application. I only would like to summarize, Mr. Chairman and committee, that the solicitor for Mr. Scott indicated his remorse for proceeding without a permit. He has essentially stopped the work, other than some cosmetic things that he did at the permission of the Trent Severn people. But one of the reasons that we'd asked that the go-to committee, as originally recommended, not only back in April of 2021 and June of 2021, but also as late as August 22nd by the very planner that's now saying we want a rezoning. The reason that I asked to proceed is a matter of urgency. Mr. Scott's got a building that's virtually sitting there waiting to get completed, and a lot's happened. So my request to have this before the committee, which is greatly appreciated, is simply to get on with it because he's in a very precarious state with this partial construction. So I thank you and the committee for your time. And I believe Mr. and Mrs. Scott are on the line as well. Should there be any specific questions that the committee wishes to ask them. Thank you, sir.
Tenants that wishes to address this application before I close the public session. I don't see any hands. Does anyone else see hands?
Mr. Chair, I have a few final remarks just before you close discussion, if that's appropriate.
Yes, thank you very much. Please be brief.
I will be brief. So in general, Mr. Scott also concedes that the environmental impact report does recommend additional vegetation to introduce that buffer, like-for-like restoration, and these are reasonable. Additional vegetation will be added as required. The impact assessment also concedes that the nearshore environment is challenging, and this is as true as it was prior to the renovation as it is today. And so it is important to remember what has not changed. The dwelling was and is 10.0 meters from the shoreline. The dwelling was and is 9 meters high, and the non-complying nature of the building's front yard with respect to the expansion has not been further exaggerated. For many of the conclusions in the staff report, it's based on that fundamental flaw that has the incorrect calculation of the gross floor area. And that's fair enough, it was in the application, but it does distort the reality. And so I would like to ask the council members through you, Mr. Chair, to keep that in mind for their consideration. So on behalf of the applicant, I would ask the council members to approve this request for a minor variance application.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Mr. Happlestall. Seeing no other members of the public wishing to address the committee, I will close the public session and bring the application before the committee for any questions or concern. And we'll begin with member Demkiw. And you are on.
Thank you, Chair Hill. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, in looking at both sides of this issue, first of all, I still in my mind don't understand why it even came to us with the fact that the building was done without a building permit. That's just my opinion of that, and I think there's too many issues on the four tests, so I would go with denial of this.
Thank you, Member Demkiw. Member Ferguson. Mike.
Yep, I must admit that I'm still somewhat lacking understanding between the 48 and the 88% increase. I think there are still a vast number of environmental issues to be dealt with here. And at the very best, I think until some of these things are ironed out, I would only go as far as the deferral.
Thank you very much. Member Caddo.
Thanks, Chair Hill. A lot of work was done there without the permit, and how he's got away with that far. It's he seemed to have done a lot of work without a permit. Yeah, I agree with Member Fergus. A deferral, maybe if we could, set a deadline. I would support a deferral. Let's see if we can clean this up, maybe.
Thank you very much. Member Jarvis.
Yeah, just remind committee that the recommendation is to deny as opposed to defer. So we may have to look at something different if we want to defer. So I see that. Yeah, we could choose to defer. I see that as an option. My thinking is there's even more that needs to be corrected, but I can accept that we need to get things done with regards to the environmental impact assessment and restoration plan, seeing what's been done on the waterfront and how close this building is to the waterfront. I appreciate the report once again from our planning department on this, and no further questions.
Thank you, Member Jarvis. Member Matthews.
Thank you, Chair Hill. I really can't support this. I mean, the view from the canoe, if I was across from that, I would be extremely upset to look at this monstrous place. It doesn't fit with the Muskoka official plan. It doesn't fit with the township plan. It doesn't fit the 4 tests. I think even deferral, we may find a couple of answers, but still, I don't think I would be satisfied. And on top of it, going ahead without a permit and asking for a resource, he's very upset that happened. I just, the way it is right now, I cannot support this application.
Thank you, Member Matthews. Member Coutier.
I wonder if I would like to hear our planners comment on the suggestion that they've miscalculated the expansion gross floor area. I would like to hear their response to that before I start expressing some of my thoughts.
Then let's go ahead and do that. And anyone else on the committee that has a question that they may have would like to ask before we come back, please go ahead and do so. So based on that, we'll go back to the planner and ask for their comment regarding the calculation of the GFA.
Through your Chair Hill to Member Coetzee, the gross floor area calculation was calculated in consultation with the applicant's engineer who designed the drawings based on our definition of gross floor area, that the GFA was included on the submitted drawings, and through our own review and confirmation, we agreed with the GFA as stated on those drawings. Since then, we have not received correspondence to suggest otherwise until today. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate that. I find myself agreeing with staff recommendation for a denial. I think that there's a number of issues here that are of concern, and I fully respect the fact that some of them were inherited with the property before the current development began. I don't know whether the very remorseful state of the applicant is because he's genuinely made an innocent mistake, or is because that's the recommendation of his lawyer that he be very remorseful. But I find it difficult to imagine somebody building something this large without comprehending that maybe the municipality might want to issue a building permit. But that aside, it's a significant expansion, and I find myself agreeing with staff recommendation that this is probably something that should go before council, not before committee of adjustment. And therefore, I find myself agreeing with their recommendation for denial at this time.
Thank you, Member Coutier. Just from my own comments, having seen been at the site and saw the amount of construction that has taken place before the stop work order and after, and I do appreciate why the applicant may want to make sure that the work that had been done was protected from the elements, that sort of thing. There was, this project began without having a building permit. There was opportunity for them to discuss with the building department and the planning department what their intentions were beforehand. And, having proceeded to the extent that they have without interacting with the township people, I think is quite a concern. My opinion would be the same as others have mentioned, and I believe this application needs to go before council to get a planning amendment as opposed to a minor variance. I don't see it as being minor. And so with that in mind, I have a resolution that will address that, and I'll read the resolution and we can express our votes from there. Just before I do that, were there any other questions or comments before I proceed? Member Caddo?
Thanks, Chair Harold. So I just had the question. I think you kind of answered there. If it's denied, it goes to the planning committee and so on and so forth, I guess is what happens the next step.
If the application gets denied, then the minor variance application ends right there. And then it would be up to the applicant to take whatever other steps that they wish to in order to proceed with the development of the property. Okay. So it ends. And the applicant, of course, has an appeal period following the decision of the Committee of Adjustment. So they can deal with that as well. Are there any other questions or observations before we proceed? Member Ferguson? Oh, you're muted again.
Yep. Just a quick question. Were we ever provided with a reason why a building permit was not applied for before all this construction took place? Obviously, there was an existing building there, so there must have been building permits at one stage. And then we do this massive addition, and mysteriously, there's no building permit applied for. I'd like an answer to that if we could.
Well, I don't see that the applicant is here, and I would expect that that would be a question that would have to go directly to the applicant. I see the Mr. Happenstall has his hand up, so you wish to offer a comment on behalf of the applicant?
I do. I see that Mr. Jackson has also turned his video back on. I would just be reading from Mr. Jackson's initial opinion, which does have the answer to that question. In brief, what was originally supposed to be a smaller project evolved into a larger amount of work. And this was in the context of a COVID world, having got caught up in the COVID world where communications were stressed at best. And so it would be my assessment that a small thing got out of hand.
Okay, thank you for that. I see other hands up. So let's begin with Ms. Godet.
Thank you, Chair Hill. I suspect my colleague Catherine is going to be able to provide more detail, so I'll defer to her. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gatzos.
Through you, Chair Hill, to committee, it is my understanding that as a result of the stop work order and the order to comply issued by the building department, a building permit application was submitted on behalf of the applicant. Again, for the reasons that Mr. Happenstall stated earlier, that building permit remains open as the matter has not been decided upon. Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Godet.
Sorry, I would just like to clarify too, for benefit of the committee, that the work that continued after the stop work order was not only to the house, it also included a new dock. Just so everybody is aware.
Okay, thank you very much. Then, I think we have clarity. Are you okay with that, Member Ferguson? Okay, thank you very much. Then with that, and seeing no further questions, I will read the resolution. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment receives Development Services Report 2022-86 and denies minor variance application A21-25 to zoning bylaw 2014-75 as amended for 89 Sunrise Trail to permit the GFA expansion of a legally existing non-complying dwelling of 88% to total GFA of 312.53 square meters, with an existing setback of 10.01 meters, where a GFA expansion of 40%, total GFA of 232.68 square meters is permitted, and to recognize the appropriate height of 9 meters for the existing dwelling, as well as the as-built expansion when 8 meters is permitted. Now, just so we're clear, if you raise your hand, you are agreeing with denial of the application. All right, we're all clear on that. So all those who are in favor of denial of the application, please raise your hand. Thank you very much. The application is denied and the motion is carried. Okay, our next matter is the consent application that is not subject to a public meeting. It was a consent application we had considered at our last meeting. It is number B22-03 for 951 Honey Harbor Road. And again, looking at the hour, before I begin, does anyone need a break here, or are we okay to proceed? Okay, I take that as a go for it. And so again, B22-03 to the planner, please. And is it Miss Sandy this time? We're gonna have to do a.
Good afternoon,
boy,
everyone.
You sound better now.
Yeah, I just wanted to check that my audio is audible and everything's working fine.
Much
Okay.
better, yes.
Okay, great. I'll start my presentation. I'll share my screen in a minute.
Thank you.
Okay, so I will be speaking to the consent application B2203, which was previously brought forward before committee at the September 16 meeting. I will provide a brief presentation on the proposal today. The applicants for the proposed consent application are Alden and Jody Brissett. The address of the subject property is 951 Honey Harbor Road, and the purpose of this consent application is to create a new residential lot with an area of about 1.5 hectares and a frontage of about 178 meters on Honey Harbor Road, and a frontage of about 56 meters and 52 meters on Bass Bay Road. I would like to note that since the last presentation before committee, staff have reasonably resolved the pending issues with the on this application with the applicant. Here's a location map of the subject property. The subject property is located on the west side of Honey Harbor Road, and Bass Bay Road traverses through the property. Here's an aerial view of the subject property. It has a lot area of about 5.4 hectares and a total lot frontage of about 500 meters on Honey Harbor Road. Here's a plan of survey showing the proposed severance. The applicant is proposing creation of a new residential lot. The severed lot will have an area of about 1.5 hectares and a frontage of about 179 meters on Honey Harbor Road. About 55 meters on and 55 meters on either side of Bass Bay Road. The retained lands will have an area of about 3.8 hectares and a frontage of about 327 meters on Honey Harbor Road. Here's an overview of the planning data associated with the subject property. The property is considered rural lands in context of the PPS. Additionally, a PSW or a provincially significant wetland is identified adjacent to the property, and the wetland is identified on the subject property itself as well. The property is also within fox snake regulated habitat area and within the influence of a non-operating non-municipal waste disposal site. The subject property is designated rural in the township official plan, and a PSW is located adjacent to the subject property. The property is zoned shoreline residential type. I apologize. The property is zoned residential type 1 or R1 in the township zoning bylaw. Staff have reviewed the proposal in context of the applicable policy framework. The proposal is supported by an EIS prepared by Sumac Environmental Consulting Limited and a landfill impact assessment prepared by TerraProbe. These reports were peer reviewed by Hutchinson Environmental. Subject to the addressal of these comments provided by Township environmental consultants, staff are of the opinion that the application is consistent with the BPS and conforms to the district and township official plans. Additionally, the proposal complies with all provisions of the zoning bylaw except for lot frontage or road frontage for the severed lands as a frontage of 52.54 meters is proposed for the severed lands and 60 meters is required by the zoning bylaw. Staff recommend a zoning bylaw amendment application to rezone the environmental features identified on the subject property. The deficiency for lot frontage or road frontage can also be addressed at the same time through the same application if provisional approval is granted to the application today. Based on review of the relevant policies, staff recommend approval of the application with the standard conditions such as payment of taxes, submission of a registered reference plan, and payment of fees and disbursements as applicable. Additionally, staff recommend that the portion of the subject property to the south of Bass Bay Road not be separately conveyable from the portion to the north, and the peer review comments on EIS and landfill impact assessment be addressed to the satisfaction of the township, and the recommendations provided through these reports be implemented through site plan control. It is also recommended that a zoning bylaw amendment application be completed to zone the environmental features on the property and address the lot frontage deficiency. Additionally, the applicants and the township have met regarding the expropriation of Bass Bay Road. It is my understanding that the lands will be purchased at fair market value and the expropriation of road is a proposed condition of this severance. That is my presentation, and I'll be happy to take any questions you may have at this time.
Thank you, Gershman. I guess we don't need to find out if there's been any correspondence because we've had a correspondence already. I noticed that the applicant is present in the meeting today. Welcome back, Jody. Is there anything that you wish to add to the comments that are made by the planner so far?
Yes, please. Thank you. It's Jody Brissett, and my husband Alden is here with me today. I'd ask that the committee, at the last discussion, we were kind of going back and forth about the peer review comments, and there was discussion in favor and discussion against, but the committee didn't actually come to an agreed motion that would give us a direction that we could discuss with the municipality. When we went into our meeting with the municipality, it was pretty much basic. We didn't have a direction from the committee, whether it was a yay or nay. So we couldn't really talk about that point. I did contact the firms that did our studies for us. The TerraProbe, who performed the D4 groundwater study, indicated, well, there's a new person assigned. So I had to send background information and speak with them. They indicated that from the peer review, they're asking to provide a underground study being required, which Ms. Gaudette implied the last time that it would be included in the original cost, which we've learned from the firm it is not. And they would then send us a proposal as to what the additional fees would be for this underground study. I've also contacted Sumac Environmental, who performed the EIS study, and she indicated to me that, again, part of the peer review was that we went before the ministry and made an application on their behalf, which I expressed at the last was a minimal fee, but they would be happy to do so. I've also learned from them that an application to the ministry could take a minimum of 4 to 6 months to obtain. So I would like to ask this committee and impress upon you that we have a direction with this so that I can either confirm or, this is so frustrating. We just need a firm direction from the committee so that I know where I'm going and we know what we're looking at in a time frame, because if we're being meant to implement these additional studies, and I will call them additional studies because they come with additional fees. It's not included in the same thing. We're looking at another 6 months minimum.
Okay, I appreciate that. Just so you know, Ms. Brissett, the whole purpose of the Committee of Adjustment is to help you get to where you want to get to. the township is restricted by all of the rules and regulations that are in place. They have no leeway. And so that's why applications come before the committee, so that, you know, we can use our experience and information provided by the town to help you get what you want to do. So, you know, we've always been of that bent. I understand that you had a very progressive meeting with the township since the last Committee of Adjustment meeting. And am I to understand that a number of the issues that we deliberated on for so long last month are now been resolved, that you are in agreement with the town, or the town's in agreement with you on moving forward? If that's the case, then I would go back to either Ms. Sani or Ms. Godet and say, you know, what needs to happen next? You know, what are the pieces that are missing in order for the Brissettes to move forward and get, you know, this step of the approval process looked after in order to get their severance? Are you able to answer that, Ms. Sani? Okay, please proceed.
Speaking through you, Chair Hill, and for the benefit of the committee, so at this time, staff are recommending approval of the application. So if committee chooses to provisionally approve the application today, the applicants would have 2 years to meet all the conditions that are set out in the conditions of provisional approval in this application. So one of the things is addressal of all the peer review comments. So the township process is the applicant submits a report, that report goes to our experts for review, and then any comments or any additional requirements that they have to make their recommendations need to be provided by the applicant to them. So that's the part that we're missing right now. The study has been submitted, peer review comments have been provided. It's just the response back to our environmental consultants on the comments provided by them that's currently missing. A number of other issues with regards to the road, I think the township has already discussed with the owners. The road will be purchased at fair market value. The township is working on it in the back end. And I believe the only other issue was the cash in lieu payment for Parkland. Based on committee's direction, we have removed that condition from this recommendation.
Okay, so you know, of the three main categories, it looks like the purchase of the road allowance is looked after, and you know, the settlement of those conditions are there. I'm not really sure where those additional requirements came from that was mentioned by Ms. Brissette. You know, the additional underground study and this ministry application. Was that part of the discussion we had last month? Go ahead, Ms. Sani.
Yes, Chair Hill, those were the comments that were submitted by our environmental consultants, by the township's environmental consultants. That is the additional information that they are required to make their recommendation.
Okay. And again, I'll go back to you, Ms. Brissette. Are you fine with what you've heard today and understand what's being required of you as far as next steps are concerned?
We're not fine with it. I do understand it. Well, sort of. They're asking for a groundwater study for a former transfer site. There's 14 homes or dwellings, including a restaurant, that are all closer than our lot, including your house. I think if there was a problem with the groundwater, it would have become evident by now.
The problem herein with this study that we're really struggling with is the environmental study and the groundwater study that we had conducted by the accredited firms indicated, especially the D4 groundwater study, indicated no significant impact above ground. So if there's no evidence above ground and this site hasn't been operated in over 30 years, why are we being forced to do a study and pay for additional things for below ground on the possibility of a could? Like,
I see Ms. Godet has her hand up. Can you respond to that, please?
Yeah, if I could, I'd like to my knowledge, no one sitting around this virtual table right now is an expert in any of these matters. So I would hope we don't go down the route of trying to, interpret the expertise too much. Through the peer review process, there is an opportunity for the Brissett's consultant to chat with Hutchinson, better understand their comments, and they come to an agreement as experts. So we follow what Hutchinson says as the township's experts, but if there's a feeling that Hutchinson is they've gone too offside one way or the other, the Brissett's consultants can talk with them and they together address so when we say address the peer review comments, that is part of that process too, is agreeing on, okay, what's your concern? How do we address it? It doesn't necessarily have to be to the letter what Hutchinson says. They come to that conclusion. So I hope that provides some clarity, and would just like to remind committee, peer review is a standard township process. It's not only being applied to this application and these studies.
Okay, that is worthwhile information. I appreciate that, Ms. Cadet. And again, just so that we don't get into the same discussion we had last month, my understanding is then that the approval of this consent application by the Committee of Adjustment is but one step forward for the Brissetts in getting to their, and again, to be fair to everybody, the limit of the jurisdiction of the Committee of Adjustment is based on the terms that we talked about last month. And my feeling is that, and I will ask each of the members individually for any questions or comments, but the Committee of Adjustment is in favor of moving forward to the next step. So with that in mind, if there are no further questions or comments from the applicant or the public, I'll close the public session, bring the application before the committee for any questions or comments. Oh, there is a quick one from Ms. Brissett.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I was speaking with our consultant from the environmental firm this morning, and she is supposed to have a revised draft report to me today to view, with the exception of the ministry consultation in there. I know there was some gaps in information that Hutchinson was looking for, and they've conducted a site plan on September 27th, and they have that information filled in. So I just wanted to let them know about that.
Okay, thank you very much. To the committee members then for any questions or comments. And I will begin with Member Demkew.
Thank you, Chair Hill. It's nice to see that some progress has been made. If we approve the application today, hopefully we won't see this come back. I'm okay with approving it based on the fact that they're trying to work together. That's about all the comments I have right now.
Okay, thank you very much. Member Ferguson.
So what we would be providing today would be a conditional approval based on certain things happening. Is that not correct?
That's correct. That's my understanding.
Sure. Yeah, and that's a step in the right direction. So I don't have a problem with that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Member Ferguson. Member Matthews.
Thank you, Chair Hill, and Mr. Ferguson, you sort of took the words out of my mouth for clarity, so thank you for that. And I can only express my feelings. I'm sure the Brissetts must be feeling extremely frustrated. We're doing the best we can to get you there. My question, I guess, is the piece of land that will be on the south side of Bass Bay Road. Is there anything that could be done with that in the future? Or is they've got this hunk of land that is...
Ms. Sandy has a response to that.
Yes, speaking through you, Mr. Chair, to Member Matthews, at this time, we've, in our conditions, noted that the piece of land to the south of the road shall remain with the piece to the north. But we've had discussions with the applicants as well as the township are trying to engage with the neighbors to see if one of those parties would be interested in purchasing that piece. If not, that lot cannot be independently developed as a residential lot.
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks very much. Member Caddo.
Thanks, Chair Hill. The question for planning, so the peer review by Hutchinson, however long it takes them to do this, it could be turned down. They could say, well, we found a snake or we this or that. It could also be turned down, and another 6 months from now, the Brissets go through all their due diligence and it gets turned down another 6 months from now. So basically, is that what you're saying? It could get turned down?
I see Miss Sandy's hand is up again.
Speaking through you, Chair Hill, to Member Cadu. So the peer review comments have already been sent in from our township's consultants, so Hutchinson. Now it's up to the applicants and their consultants to review, revise, or negotiate with Hutchinson based on both of them being experts and reach a reasonable resolution to how to address those comments. So it's the ball is in the experts' court at this time.
So then why do they have to hire their own firm for the environmental studies when the township has their own? So it's just an expense on them.
So again,
go ahead, Ms. Sandy.
Speaking through you, Chair Hill, so that is standard process. The township's consultants will only review the studies that are prepared by the applicant's consultant. So the township's consultants they would just say if they agree or do not agree and what else needs to be done to reach where the applicants want to reach. So they're just reviewing, in this case, they would just be the reviewers of the report. It is same with the planning staff. So planning staff review the applicants that are brought forward. They don't advocate for the applicants. They review the applications independently on the merits of that application and the applicable policy framework. So that's the same the environmental consultants do in their area of expertise, if that makes sense.
Okay, and again, I think what's happening is we're putting an obstacle where there may not be one, and that if there had been some major concern from the environmental study, we wouldn't be having this conversation. It probably would never have come to committee. So when you get advisory groups like this, they look at the minutia of what they see. I don't think anybody's seen a fox snake around for a while, so that I think we should move past that and let the environmental companies console one another as to what they want to see going forward. But I don't see that as an obstacle right now.
Well, I just don't want to see them put off another 6 months and for what they've been going through. So like, I'm not sure how I'm going to vote that this gets cleared up today. They got approval. Now, I'm not sure how we go about doing this. Anyways,
Colin, it's out of our hands. It's in the hands of the environmental people at this point. But we're gonna do what we can to move the ball down the field. And speaking of that, Member Jarvis, do you have any comments or questions for
Talking about moving the ball down the road, then you give me the floor. Good for you. I really appreciate all the effort that has to go into getting a severance taken care of. The environmental work, the studies that need to be done. I think it's great that we're putting people, making sure everything is covered, so to speak. I wish we had the same type of process in place for things like legal non-complying property expansion, but that's an observation. Onwards, I'm still really grappling with this concept that there's a landfill on the site, or was a landfill on the site, when from what I gather there was not a landfill on this site, and in fact the landfill is quite a distance away, or was when it existed, and it was quite some time ago. I think Jody said upwards of 30 years ago. So I'm trying to figure out whether this landfill concept is a total red herring. I know Mr. Caddo and I both expressed concerns, like maybe other people, about this one specific aspect of the application and the requirements. Do we know where there's no mapping here that we've been presented with showing us where the landfill was, or whatever. Can I have clarification on that?
Well, just, pardon me, before we go down that path, Mr. Jarvis, with all due respect, that's not what this application is about. That is, a discussion point that the environmental study brought up. I think we've had a lot of discussion as to the fact that this is something that's long in the past, and it's certainly not within our purview to make decisions based on environmental issues. So
I know, but it is items 5 and 6 within the recommendation. I think in that context, it is worth further discussion. I'm happy to take a small answer on this. I understand what you're saying, Chair Hill. It is, yeah, I'm not an expert. I know that. And perhaps one of my comments has been made evident to everybody else, the same thing. Maybe Grissom Mem can answer my question quickly and we can get on with things.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, speaking through you, Chair Hill, I'll just share my screen here for a minute. So this is the township or the district's mapping. I hope everyone can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
This is the location of the non-municipal, non-operating waste disposal site. And this is the applicant's property.
Oh, wait.
As you can see, we're within the influence area of the waste disposal site. And the official plan policies ask us to take all the precautionary measures and get a study done if anything is being proposed within the influence area of the waste disposal site.
Clarification, keep the map up if you don't mind, Grissom Ram. Where's the land that's being severed, proposed severed land with regards to that?
So the severance would be somewhere around here.
I think it's a little
This is-
further down the road. I don't think it's within the purview of the scope of that. So I'm failing to
yes.
understand it, but again, I'm not an expert.
Yes, but the subject property itself is in the influence area, and we depend on our environmental consultants to advise if anything further needs to be looked at to development in context of the influence area.
Thank you. Thank you for your indulgence, Chair Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Jarvis. Member Coutier.
I'm far too tempted to make some comment about we should stick to our knitting, but perhaps that's being inappropriate. But I can't help but think it. We're overthinking this. If we approve this, then we're out of the way. And I think that's the important thing. If we believe that this separation of these properties into two, and the piece that is being separated might even be outside that blue circle we saw, which I found very interesting because that blue circle in that prior map was not centered on where the actual site is, which I thought was also very interesting to observe. But having said that, I have no problem approving this. I think that the conditions that are there are typical conditions. We ask people who want to do a severance, and we had one earlier this meeting as well, where they have to do an environmental study that gets peer reviewed. And that is only an issue, the peer review, if they have a couple of questions. And we heard from the applicant that those questions are being responded to in the report. I think they've received it today, that will be submitted to respond to those questions. So that may be out of the way fairly quickly. I can hope so. But our job is to determine whether we believe that this is a reasonable severance and whether the two remaining properties, if you will, the original property and the severed property are reasonable properties. And in my mind, there's no doubt they are. And I would not hesitate to approve this application at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Coutier. So with that, we have comments and questions from everyone. And I will read the resolution, which for the sake of the recommendation from the township and what we're voting on is to approve the consent application so far, which basically, as it was mentioned earlier, takes you one step closer to getting to where you want to be. So I will read the resolution. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment receives Development Services Report 2022-89 and hereby recommends approval to consent application B22-03 as advertised, subject to the following conditions. Municipal taxes shall be paid in full up to date of request of issuance of the consent certificate. A reference plan of the consent shall be prepared and duly registered by an Ontario land surveyor, and one copy filed with the Secretary Treasurer of the committee. A draft copy of the reference plan shall be provided to the Secretary Treasurer for review and approval prior to registration on title. The 20-meter right-of-way on Bass Bay Road shall be identified as a separate part of this reference plan. That all fees and disbursements, legal, engineering, planning, if any, incurred by the township with respect to this application shall be paid for by the owner. That the portion of the severed lands to the south of Bass Bay Road shall not be separately conveyable from the portion of the severed lands to the north of Bass Bay Road. That any comments provided through the peer review of the environmental impact assessment and landfill impact assessment be addressed by the applicant to the satisfaction of the township. The applicant shall implement mitigation measures recommended through the environmental impact assessment, landfill impact assessment, and the subsequent peer review by entering into a site plan control agreement with the township. And 7, that the applicant obtain approval for a zoning bylaw amendment at their sole cost to zone the environmental features identified through the environmental impact study. Additionally, the zoning bylaw amendment shall address the lot frontage and road frontage deficiencies on the severed lots. That the applicant obtain a conditional permit from the District of Muskoka for the proposed severed and retained lots for access onto the district road. That lands to be subject to an agreement with the District Municipality of Muskoka pursuant to Section 51, subsection 26 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990 as amended, respecting the location of wells to the district road. 10, that the applicant shall coordinate with the township to facilitate the expropriation or purchase of a 20-meter right-of-way for Bass Bay Road. 11, the conditions set out herein shall be completed within 2 years of the date of decision of the committee. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Thank you very much. The motion is carried and the consent application is approved. Thank you, everyone. And our next resolution is I have a motion from Member Matthews, seconded by Member Caddo. Be it resolved that the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment does now adjourn at 12:47 p.m. Until January 23rd, 2023. Is that correct, Marcia?
Chair Hill, yes, it is correct.
Yeah, we're out of here.
Committee will resume in January 2023. A date has not yet been set.
So, nothing for November or December. Okay, so be it resolved, the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of Adjustment does now adjourn until January 23 or at the call of the chair. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Thank you very much. The motion is carried.